Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another edition of the Civ Battle Royale. My name is Dawkinzz and let's get right into it. This part is brought to you by a couple of people. No, not this time. It's just Sledge115, a loyal and true commentator who did part 49 back in the day. So let's see how he does this time. To many, players and spectators alike, the Orange Containment Project was a bust. That by no means the end of the war on the cylinder, nor the potential downfall of the Boers. The ever-talented Spherical Melon returns to show us his interpretation of the events of the OCP. And look at all that shading and shadows, the dude is so good. Where we last left off, Yakutia is on the brink of utter destruction as Korean, Inuit, Mongol, and Finnish forces roam where they once reigned supreme. They won't be long for this world. In the New World, Brazilian ground forces waving the flag of Stop Overseas Piracy Alliance rampage across former Buccaneer lands, securing their dominion over South America. To the north, the Australians continue to pound the tenacious defense of Mexico amidst nuclear hellfire as the Blackfoot make their push, while the Inuit White Walkers begin to stir on the land of always winter. Here, in front of a blurred out picture of the Kimberley, I think, Kirby ATK-48 returns with a top 10 spotlight, showing us the most powerful players as of part 78. The Boers remain in the top spot, for now at least. There needs to be another coalition of actual good civilizations that are going to have to take the Boers out if there's going to be any grounds. Otherwise, the Boers are just going to spread their cancer across the world. Spherical Melon continues to show off their artistic talents by having this map prepared with all of the cities and city sizes and all of this ridiculous stuff. There are a lot of other people, Edzy, Uncle Moose, Laxraxoriscal. If I'm forgetting you, then I'm sorry, but yeah, a lot of work goes into this crap. Speaking of Edzy 1991, here is his raw glory of hexagon maps that's very accurate. We begin with a shot of Osaka, formerly the last stronghold of Emperor Meiji's fledgling Japanese Empire. While they had experienced a brief restoration with the help of the Korean army, the Kimberley put an end to that dream and forced His Imperial Highness Sejong of Korea to establish a puppet government. In spite of Sejong comforting him with a friendly pat of reassurance, Emperor Meiji silently weeps over Japan and the end of his people's hopes to reclaim the home islands. Here's to Meiji's Japan and the dreams of what could have been millennia past. The Kimberley invasion force sent to capture Osaka in the meantime has been reduced to a single battleship, facing off against a vastly superior Korean arsenal ship and surrounded by a massive underwater flotilla of submarines. The captain on board contemplates his options. Will he fight to the last? Will he surrender to the mercy of Sejong? Or will he take another option and end it all with a single bullet? Ooh, that's a little too Pepe me IRL for me. Whatever his choice, the captain stares off to the distance as Korean-Japanese banners are raised over the city his comrades have bled for in vain. Good thing he's a big fan of anime because that will continue under a Korean reign. The Brazilian Air Force recovers from another bombing run over at Buccaneer-held Belo Horizonte, eager to restore it under Dom Pedro II's rule. If you look over into the Atlantic Ocean, you can see pretty much nothing. You see a couple of black submarines in the top. You see a definite amount of aircraft carriers that are not filled with anything, as is Henry Morgan's favorite thing in the world, I guess. You see some hover tanks, which is, I guess, a Boer fetish, and a lot of nothing else. It's scary. Despite having not much going for them in terms of actual defense, I mean, they have the fodder of aircraft carriers and very few melee units. The Buccaneers will hold out for a foreseeable future. Brazil needs to get past all of those units and they lack a significant navy, and the Inuit up north are barely getting their shit together. It's a song of ice and fire as the Blackfoot storm the irradiated deserts of Mexico, looming under the shadow of the Inuit to the east. In this version of Game of Thrones, each house has its own representative. The White Walkers are obvious, the Blackfoot are the Night's Watch, Mexico is House Bolton, and the Sioux were once House Stark. It appears I was slightly misinformed about Buccaneer strength in North America, with Cincinnati standing firm in the face of the Inuit offensive, and an Inuit XCOM squadron facing certain death inside Buccaneer-held territory. Henry Morgan faces the tempting option of pushing further into the land of always winter, but for that he needs men needed down south against Pedro's forces. The Inuit, on the other hand, have a disturbing shortage of men in what was once Texan land. While the bulk of their army is, at the moment, stationed to halt any Buccaneer offensive further inland, Henry Morgan will surely seize the opportunity to sue for peace or push onwards. Or perhaps another betrayal is in the works. Iberia burns. Finnish and Boer forces begin their thrust into Buccaneers' first overseas holdings, setting it ablaze with nuclear fire and scorching the ground where they go. The Finnish flag is raised over Goa while a trio of Finnish XCOMs cross the Pyrenees. Pyrenees, is that how you say it? Boer hover tanks begin their siege of Porto, and in the former Portuguese coast, Lisbon begins to take damage under aerial bombardment. With Boer reinforcements in Gibraltar, the Finnish XCOMs looming just out of sight, things look dire for Henry Morgan's transatlantic empire. We switch on over to a bird's eye view of the devastation across the coast of Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. All but one of the Buccaneer cities are in danger of capture, and as seen previously, Porto is under threat from Boer hover tanks and Finnish XCOM squadrons waiting just outside the gates. Things are looking absolutely yucky in South America as all hell rains down across the land. Will the Brazilians be able to clean up this mess, or will the Buccaneers hold fast and give them a run for their money? We take a break away from Henry Morgan's ordeal to take a glimpse at another clash of the Titans, the Siberian Khanate against the Vietnamese Empire. It looks pretty dire, to tell you the truth, for Siberia, with Vietnam having a force to be reckoned with. However, those are all eyes in the skies that cannot capture cities, and with the Siberian Khanate using, I think, look at that, organic infantry. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a thumbnail of it. But it will be a hard-met battle, but Vietnam seems to have the edge. One of the last Ethiopian soldiers to walk the cylinder sits in a ruined Swedish citadel just outside the Finnish capital of Helsinki. Say that 5 times fast. Fleeing the capture and destruction of Ethiopia, they ponder the fate of Emperor Haile Selassie. I thought I was done saying his name, Sledge. I don't want to say it anymore. One of the few to push for peace, if only for a brief time in a better world. And here they stand between the crossroads of rivals and enemies, the Lion of the North, Gustavus, and Lord President Kekkonen. Elsewhere in Finland, the rubble of a city since destroyed by nuclear bombardment remains within Siberian territory, another memorial to days gone by. Kekkonen has yet to recover entirely from the beating Finland suffered against Sibir and Sweden years ago, with their once abundant paratroopers now gone, replaced by a few scattered units of power armor infantry, But Sibir, thankfully, isn't all that better off, by the very simple fact that Kumcha's own armored force, once the largest in the world, is nowhere to be seen. They're a little bit busy in the Himalayas fighting against Vietnam near Afghanistan. Life has an odd sense of humor. Sledge wrote a pretty long and detailed analysis of this slide, and all I'm just gonna say is, fuck, it really sucks to be a Buccaneer right now. In the nuclear-blasted wasteland of Central America, things don't look much better for the Buccaneers, except for the fact that in spite of the overwhelming presence of ships from the Grand Wobbegong Armada, Australia lacks the ground forces they need to invade and push inland, and from the looks of things, only Ujmal is open for the taking at the moment. But they have patience and experience. They can afford the wait. Morgan simply cannot. A Mexican great writer flees Mexico City as news filters in of Blackfoot paratroopers surrounding the city. The road to Ciudad Juarez and Los Angeles is open and clear, but is it truly? Tired, fatigued, the writer and his companions rest on the road with a few options ahead. Will they be safer in the fortified city of Los Angeles, where the last garrison of the Mexican army is stationed? But what about Monterrey? The city has been retaken and the Pacific will be a safe haven for them. But for how long? Nothing matters, the writer realizes, when Blackfoot soldiers are sighted on the horizon. He'll be taken prisoner, tortured, and then killed. With a resigned, sad smile, he begins to write, a meme with Pepe, obviously. In the plains of Central Asia, Kumcha bolsters his front lines with robot infantry, surely a nasty little surprise for the approaching Vietnamese army. Lashkar Gah remains standing, beaten and bruised, but standing even as the city is reduced to rubble under UAV bombardment. Further north, Nishapur drops to the red, but with a lack of Vietnamese melee units save for a weakened power armor infantry, it will hold longer than it should. The Vietnamese offensive begins to stall as they struggle to reinforce their spearhead push with melee units. The mountain pass choke points Sibir possesses is costing the Vietnamese dearly, but unlike the Khanate, they still have a vast carpet of reinforcements waiting, and with the production bonus the Statue of Liberty grants, they can replace every loss easily enough. Across the Atlantic, shit continues to get real for the Buccaneers as half of Iberia is taken by Finland. Kekkonen has his sights set on Lisbon, and he's not stopping until the Buccaneers are completely gone. The Buccaneer collapse is only compounded by a peculiar figure smirking in schadenfreude over their fellow civs' collapse. That's right, even the Hawaiians are joining in. Well, not so much joining in as they are simply cheering on, but nevertheless, the Boer soldiers found themselves entertained by the general, far from home, but commanding respect nonetheless. After all, even the Boers need a bit of levity in their lives. Belo Horizonte falls to the yellow, and with Brazilian giant death robots within sight, it will not remain Buccaneer for very long. Lost during one of their earlier conflicts, it will soon be under Brazilian banners once again. Pedro II remembers, just like Pepperidge Farm, and Belo Horizonte is coming home. Piss-poor references aside, with Campeche and Freeport within range, Gran Colombiar will soon be devoid of Buccaneer forces, and thus fades the Jolly Roger over South America, and with it, rum distilleries. In the frigid asshole of the Arctic Circle, Brazilian troops watch as another empire triumphs. Korea's victory over Yakutia is all but complete. With no other option left, the Yakut government retreats to Beryozovo, a city that was, until recently, a puppet from Siberia. Now, with starvation rampant and riots in the street, Taigen Khan can only wait for the inevitable. As with the Buccaneers, Yakutia's collapse has been thoroughly brutal and violent. Like the Buccaneer before them, Yakutia was a major power, once. They were even ranked number 1 for like 20 parts. And now here they are, exiled in a frigid Arctic city, barely a shadow of their former might. To the south of Sejong's massively increased empire, a flotilla of Kimberley ships prepare to strike against the holdings in Japan armed with an atomic bomb, and who knows what else in the other carriers. However small, they are in numbers and they will have their revenge. In spite of this threat, however, Korea has little to worry about from a vestigial sleepy empire hailing from the south. As a Korean supporter, Sledge is, I'm Blackfoot supporter, duh. Recently returning in from dormancy, Korea's rise from an underdog but competent middle power to the undeniably the new top dog in northern Asia is quite the pleasant surprise, and with the Yakut threat out of the way, expansion is all the more likely, preferably the fertile lands of Australian Japan. News reports from South America have brought our satellites over in strategic view, and guess what? Things are fucked. Australia and Brazil, and maybe even the Inuit, have nuked the Buccaneers to Kingdom Come, as well as an ancient and classic vintage distillery. God have mercy on our souls. Once again, in the butthole of the Arctic Circle, Taigen Khan watches as a force of Korean hover tanks pound the walls of Berezovsk, bringing it down all the way. It will take time, of course, for the rest of the Korean army to arrive in this remote city, but there's little for Trigger Khan to do but wait for the hammer to blow. There's still time, however, for him to relive his true passion, rapping. And another pun about the North Pole and rapping and presents and stuff like that. You get the idea. A last ray of hope. Under unknown circumstances, Henry Morgan has successfully negotiated peace with the Boers, and with not a city exchange too. With this turn of fortune in Africa, the Lord Captain can now turn his attention to his remaining arch rivals, the Inuit, Australia, Brazil, and Finland, his former friends. Well, it's a start, nonetheless. Beneath the Arctic ice, a Siberian sub-captain awaits orders, but with hardly any rival navies around, there's little he can actually do. Kamchagan Sibir has proven itself to be a major, ambitious competitor in the Central Asian battlefield, emerging as the best and greatest of the three Khans of the North. Now, however, we see their other weakness. Unlike the ice sheet fleet, the Sibir Navy is trapped under both Arctic ice and behind rival borders. We now turn to the North Atlantic. Holy shit, Iceland is terrifying. Oh god. Whatever direction they point their wrath in, be it Sweden or the Inuit, they're gonna have a hard time. Iceland is a sleeping giant waiting to pounce. Despite ending the war with the Boers, Finland is still in play and continues to berate the Buccaneers across Iberia. It will only be a matter of time before those XCOM units take Porto, and then Lisbon is next on the list. Will the Buccaneers be able to hold out just even a little bit, or will they be banished to Portobello or even worse, the Caribbean? Not that the Caribbean's bad or anything, but you get what I mean. A single Inuit biotrooper unit, battered and defeated, remains within a citadel awaiting the finishing charge from the surrounding Buccaneer land forces as it looks on across the deserted and destroyed landscape of northern Florida, which is not too different from actual northern Florida. The Buccaneer soldiers hesitate. They fear the Inuit, fear their faceless masks, fear their silent terror, and the loss of Cincinnati with all of the pirates within only adds fuel to the fire. Story says that Harambe has risen from the grave and was tearing pirates limb from limb. The Buccaneer Black Fleet, on the other hand, has grown up past such silly superstitions. I need to swallow my spit. As evidenced by their task force to capture Dallas. It's not much with battleships and all, but it's far, far better than the trashing they're receiving in the Iberian Peninsula and Gran Colombiar. Baby steps, boys. Sledge with all these essays, come on! The war rages on in South America, and with Huamanga at 0 health, the news tightens around what was once the Buccaneers' largest possession. On the plus side, a few bombers have finally been relocated on board one of the carriers. As I've said, baby steps. They're making use out of those stupid carriers. Unfortunately, things are as dire as ever for the Buccaneers, with the still overwhelming presence of the Wobbegong Armada utterly dwarfing any token resistance that Black Fleet could muster on his side of the Americas. Or any side of the Americas, really. Henry Morgan's fall from grace has been downright horrifying, even more so from my point of view. This is the nation that once controlled the Atlantic from Central America to the Iberian Peninsula, and here they are broken and beaten, under the mercy of 3 major powers. The sun is setting on the Buccaneers, and I fear for the wars to come. Maybe next time around the Boers will actually be targeted by these superpowers, and they'll be taken apart. Not much has changed in this region, but we do see that Yakutia is in the corner in time out, with Mongolia, Korea, Brazil, the Inuit, and Finland all hanging out together. Perhaps it is time that Korea turned their attention to the south, where the Trungs are distracted by the Siberians. From the sweet Sri Lankan city of Kandy, Agent M reports that Parakaramba has begun plotting against the exiled Afghan soldiers currently residing in Finnish Batakaloa. But with the losses against Vietnam, Australia, and even the Kimberley over the past few dozen parts, it's only rational for the Sri Lankans to hesitate in attacking someone under Kekkonen's ambiguous protection. Eager to outdo her mentor, Semiramis brings in news of a possible war, Kamcha Khan versus Genghis Khan of Mongolia. With the war against Vietnam stalling thanks to their natural defenses, it does seem possible for the Kamcha to plot against his weaker, lesser brethren in the great game of Northern Asian Khans. Coming up soon on a new reality show brought to you by ABC right after The Bachelor. And there it is. Henry Parks has brought 2 nuclear missiles with the Wobbegong Armada task force sent to defeat the Buccaneers once and for all eternity. With Tikal already nuked, all bets are off as to when and where Parks will use these devastating missiles. With hardly any of Morgan's ships in sight, the northern part of the Wobbegong task force slowly marks south, towards Ukmal and Port-au-Prince, potentially cutting off Morgan from the west coast of his dwindling nation. One by one, the Buccaneers fall apart in Iberia. With the XCOM units pushing harder and harder than ever, Lisbon is soon to be crushed by Kekkonen. To the west, a Buccaneer settler entertains his family and friends with tales of hope and a brighter future for the Buccaneers. A better, decent world where world wars are a thing of the past and nuclear power is shut away for good. But all is for naught, with the slaughter in the peninsula continuing, and Africa painted in the orange. Further west, we see that surprisingly the Buccaneers are holding out against the ever-dreaded Inuit White Walkers, and what's more, they could stand to make some gains here. That's really weird. Inuit, what the hell are you doing? With 4 stealth bombers stationed in Petit Goave, not even the feared White Walkers can make it past Florida without being reduced to shards of ice. Unfortunately, there remains a catch: the lack of melee units in the area. Can't get everything, I suppose. A unit of Australian diggers decides that it wants to be a dick and try to snipe out Veracruz from the Blackfoot and their rightful gains. However, that won't happen because it's still in the green and the Blackfoot and Australia don't seem to be pushing up too hard. Without much city capturing going on, the diggers are left to witness the ongoing nuclear fire and conquest in the plains of North America. Where one city burns, another rises. With overpopulation becoming a concern in Seoul, a group of Korean settlers and entrepreneurs established the new port town of Ulsan, with a citadel attraction nearby, an economy based off stoneworking, and to top it off, serving as a new base for the Korean Navy, Ulsan is set to become a new economic center for the Korean Empire. Neighboring Kaesong won't be too happy to hear about a new rival town stealing their trade of Korean Navy endorsement, though. To the north, you can see that Sejong has moved a shit ton of drone fighters into the area. For what reason, I am not sure. Perhaps as a defensive measure against the Inuit in an oncoming war in future parts. However, they need something to capture cities, and that's not what they have right now. In the shores of the Caspian Sea, old meets new as the legendary Roman ballista and her crew marvels at the Siberian cyber sub, docking in port just off the coast. In a stage this late in the Battle Royale, it's heartwarming to see this ancient ballista remains alive, a testament to the glory that was Rome. Kumsha Khan's defense of Kabul and Lashkargah is paying off tremendously, with the Trunks executing their third commander in a row for failing to break the line at Kabul. And with 2 nuclear missiles still stationed in Lashkargah, the Trunks' insistence at using drone UAVs over tried and true melee units will cost them dearly should they continue. Vietnam, you gotta get your shit together because you have a bunch of eyes in the sky but not enough boots on the ground. You need those in order to take cities, in order to make gains, in order to win the game. So get going. As our spy satellite shuts off the graphical UI, we see a Mongolian helicopter gunship stationed in the ice caps watching from a distance as the siege of Beryozhovo continues. The crew privately wonders if it will be worth the effort to kill Yakusha first and risk the wrath of Korea, or kill the hover tank and risk the wrath of Korea. Sometimes the best action is inaction, and so they did just that. When I first saw this slide, I thought we were witnessing another ruined city of nuclear destruction. However, I was disappointed, and Yakusha still remains alive. Our agents shuffle around once again and move to other locations to see which civilization is plotting against a long-dead civilization. I'm gonna make this another plea. TPangolin, please, let's take a look at the Blackfoot. We haven't viewed them in the entire series. I think they deserve a chance. Great, I'll give you a kiss? Is that what you want? No. Okay, moving on. Well, I'll be damned. In light of the recent devastation brought upon the world by nuclear weapons, the UN will discuss the possibility to downright ban the construction of new nukes. In a fresh breath of air, it looks like we're looking at a potentially game-changing proposal at last. Should this proposal be successful, we might see huge ramifications across the globe for major powers from Sibir to Korea to Brazil. However, given the number of nuclear weapon states on the planet, I'm not sure if it'll pass. Probably not. In other news, a proposal to ban silk is in motion. I suspect Kumsha Khan has something to do with it, with silk being a major commodity exported by Vietnam. A ban on its sale might cripple their economy. Or they just prefer wool. Wool is warm. As the United Nations prepares their resolution, Australia wraps its tentacles around South America. They are really pushing forward into this new continent, and they're really making gains for themselves. If they make any more gains against the Buccaneers, they're going to put a lot of problems ahead of the Brazilians, the Inuit, and the Blackfoot. Let's see what Lord Parks can do now, as his real objective is the Nassau Canal. Should he invade and consolidate his rule in Central America, Australia can reach into the Atlantic and establish the one true empire where the sun never sets, just like Father Britain always wanted. The Buccaneers have several cities brought into the yellow as Australia demonstrates their dominance with nuclear hellfire. The entire region has been set ablaze, and with additional bombardment from the coast, I don't really see the Bucks recovering from this in a very, very long time. However, in spite of this, I'm not seeing that many land units against the Wobbegong Task Force here. It could be that Parks is planning to bombard the region into submission first before sending his landing force in. Whatever the reason, both Morgan and Parks will need to bring even more land units to the area. That is, if they can survive the fallout. Or if they can crawl out through the fallout. I'm sorry. Once again, we get a satellite switch and we see the full extent of the bombardment of Mexico and the Buccaneer-held lands. It's disgusting, everybody's a mutant and or dead. Far, far away from the nuclear holocaust undergoing in Central America, Buccaneer Marines and tanks desperately try to hold back the Finnish army, encroaching upon their last stronghold in mainland Europe. but it is in Leiria where they coordinate their final stand, with no less than 10 stealth bombers poised to strike at anyone close enough. Will it be enough to halt the Finnish advance, though? Probably not. Semiramis continues to send remarkably clear intel. Good on her. A potential hotspot might be set ablaze with the flames of war again, with Kumcha plotting against the rising Sejong. But a second glance shows that Sibir will need to wade through Mongol and Finnish territory to reach his target. Some clever diplomacy is needed here, and Kumcha has no time for silly negotiations. Ishtar makes somewhat of a bullshit prediction as he plots against the Mongolians. How this will materialize we'll never know for sure, but given that the Brazilians are currently trashing the Buccaneers, I'm willing to bet that they'll be turning their eyes towards someone else soon enough. Speaking of which, the Black Fleet has just turned a shade of its former self during the age-old invasion of Portuga. Is it Portuga or Tortuga? For God's sake, what the hell is going on in Harry Morgan's mind? I see a couple, what is that, 4 or 5, 6 submarines on the slide, and a fuck ton of meaty aircraft carriers with nothing on them. He's completely lost it, and Freeport will pay the ultimate price for that. Meanwhile, at the halls of justice, Australian listening posts in the former Hawaiian Isles intercept and observe as Inuit ships pass by, and there's a lot of them. Why? No one's sure for now, but what is certain is one of their subs is carrying 2 nuclear missiles. Whatever Econic's planning for the Pacific, it can't be good for everyone else. In the Lhasa, a Tibetan great musician entertains the bored masses of riflemen, cannon crew, and workers with a new composition of classical, wonderful music. Unfortunately, the drones and robotic military of the Vietnamese only enjoy EDM. Speaking of being pissed off at Tibet, His Imperial Highness Sejong declares the music of the Tibetan enclave to be an affront to his nephew in Pyongyang. His Imperial Highness declares war on the windswept kingdom. Unfortunately, he'll have to get past all of those UAV drones watching the mountain passes. Such is life in Central East Asia. In the Andes, Australia creeps on even more with hover tanks and all sorts of disgusting little creatures crittering across South America. Will Brazil be pissed off at this new encroachment, or will they just allow it to happen? The first Australian soldiers have landed on the shores of Uxmal with little resistance to be met. These veterans of the Great Pacific War soon find themselves under artillery bombardment, but they have little to fear, with their arsenal ships providing vastly superior firepower. The capture of the 22 population Uxmal will be Australia's largest gain thus far in their invasion, with Port-au-Prince sitting at 0 health. Denying the Bucks 2 more coastal cities in their western coast will further accelerate their collapse, and incredibly, with exactly 1 melee unit in the whole of Central America, any capture of the Australians that they commit will stick. The sound of the didgeridoos fill the air in Uxmal, and the city braces itself for the final assault. Further along the coastline, an Icelandic frigate and her crew watches as the embers of the Mexican plains soar into the night sky. His frigate, now ceremonial, has nonetheless been equipped with a prim and proper radio, and from that radio, reports are streaming in from all across Mexico of Blackfoot paratroopers struggling against the treacherous irradiated wasteland and dogged Mexican resistance. The captain ponders it slightly, wondering if there could be some hope for the besieged Mexican people. It's a question for another day, and I'm going to tell you right now, the answer is, they fucked. A shot of the Buccaneer home islands as a Buccaneer nuclear sub retreat with a punctured hull and leaks everywhere. In spite of gains in a successful stand against the dreaded White Walkers, the captain laments the shortage of rum on board and the continued Buccaneer defeats in South America. Even the carrier shield protecting the home islands has been reduced in number, with a few left as burning husks strewn from the corpse of Morgan's fighting men. Morgan's policy in protecting the Buccaneer Corps with carrier shields has cost him dearly, for Australia and Brazil have made gains both in air and naval superiority on their front lines. Worst of all, Port Royale has been struck. Port Royale, death on the streets, freak in the sheets. The air is scorched with radiation. Morgan is furious, but there's nothing he can do. Not from this bunker. The strike on Port Royale is yet another blow to the collapsing Buccaneer cause. A loss of a staggering 23 pop is nothing they can lightly recover from, and with hardly a land army to speak about, they need all the protection they can get. Production now lost forever in the jungles and fields of South America. Imagine you're a Buccaneer living in the city of Freeport. The rum rations have all but dwindled, the walls have crumbled, and you are on your last legs, when out of the jungle comes a Brazilian Gundam, painted green and another shade of green. It looks terrifying, and you would probably shit your pants, because that's pretty much what's going on in South America right now. Brazil has all but taken the rest of South America and needs to do so before Australia moves in for the kill. In the devastated coastline of West Africa, a group of Boer workers lament their fate, trapped between the irradiated coastline and the ocean. Well, at the very least, they're not working overtime, as evidenced by the abundance of Boer workers scrubbing away the fallout in their West African holdings. The widely feared Boer death carpet has been reduced with a few scattered hover tanks and SAM emplacements. But with Africa firmly in his grasp, Paul Kruger can once again rebuild what was once the planet's greatest and most feared instrument of destruction. In most AI games of civilization, XCOM units are seen as the pinnacle of achievement, and they are to be feared. However, this Vietnamese XCOM unit might be too busy looking at memes on their phone, as they have been vanquished by the Siberians. It will unfortunately not live to see yet another day, but that does not mean that the Siberians are safe. And this is the reason why. If you look at the Vietnamese core, it is one of the most powerful fortresses in the entire planet. Gone are the days where the Viet Cong struggled against the gates of a city, for Vietnam possesses the largest autonomous force of drone UAVs in the world. An XCOM squad has been notified of their comrade's demise in the mines of Anatolia, and they begin to wonder whether or not they should rebel against their sisters for fear of their own lives. But what could they do? We move to a rare shot of New Zealand as it is being held by Australia. Formerly the Maori lands, it is now a valuable asset in the war effort. The staggering size of the Wobbegong Armada is only partially seen here, and in spite of the numerous carriers, Parks has got his priorities right, with a healthy amount of melee and range units within his infamous navy. And lo and behold, the green terror and impenetrable core of the Henry Parks Trans-Pacific Empire, just to the edge of the screen, Sydney. The Emerald Down Under stands at an excellent 44 population, fully recovered from the wars they suffered against the Maori many centuries ago. In the south, you will see a cute little giant death robot. You will also see a single Kimberley artillery unit and its crew pass the time outside of Rockhampton by playing Spot the Unit with their satellite feed, and to their charge-in, the Australian Army has camps all across the former homeland. But a peculiar sight catches their eye, for some sort of abomination has emerged from the uranium mines outside of Boyandaga. That's right! The Australians appear to have the mutants in their army now, presumably created by a hard experiment due to nuclear radiation, because the outback isn't dangerous enough already. This is taking forever. In the office of Leonidas of Devin, a courier from House Malik informs him of both Timurid and Mongol demands, the first of which is Timurid Gellius demands to fight the French Gellius in 1 versus 1 combat, while Genghis Khan demands single combat with the king himself. Leonidas politely replies that he simply doesn't have the time. Genghis mocks him for his legs. Leonidas is pissed. The downfall of Sparta wasn't a single event, much like the Byzantians. It happened over the course of millennia, just like the Byzantine Empire, and now they are demanding tolls for passage from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, such as life in the Divinity State. I'm tired of this. Let's just continue. It was all an elaborate trap the Boers have set for the Finnish. Finland does all the grunt work of taking Iberia from the Buccaneers, but now Boers will move in to take what they think is rightfully theirs, such as that of the heartless robots that they are. The Borg will try to assimilate, and the Finnish are just going to keck and try to survive. Quickly enough, the Finnish city of Epidaros on the island of Crete drops to 0 health under bombardment, and to the left you can see Olympia taking damage from Finnish naval and ground forces. Overall, though, the borders of Icelandic Greece will make navigating the Mediterranean a source of frustration for both Finnish and Boer naval officers, but that hasn't stopped the angry bird squadron now, has it? The Boers continue to demonstrate their hover tank fetish as they invade Iberia past Gibraltar. They won't make any gains here from these specific units, but things are not really looking good for the Finns. Shit, dude, the Wobbegong Armada reigns supreme as the Buccaneers lose every single one of their coastal cities this side of Central America. Worst of all, their coveted Nassau Canal now waves the flag of Henry Parks, and even with the tank division nearby, they won't be able to retake and hold their prize canal for long. The Black Fleet is tattered and ruined, sunk beneath the waters of the Pacific and the Caribbean Sea. Nothing stands between Henry Parks and victory now, and you can already see that the Australians have entered the Atlantic Ocean. Ujamal burns, and incredibly enough, it is an Australian digger that succeeds in claiming the city for Henry Parks. These veterans are prouder than ever, and with hardly any resistance left in the Yucatan Peninsula, their triumph will be remembered for all nights to come. The Buccaneer land army has never been large, even during their heyday, and in spite of their triumphs against larger foes, Morgan finds himself running out of luck. Even if he manages to pull through this war, he won't be able to build a substantial land army, not without support from his obsolete Black Fleet, and certainly not without his wasted holdings in South America. How times have changed. I feel like we've seen this slide already, but it is another shot of war-torn Mexico with their compatriots from the Great Pacific War cheering upon hearing the news even as they begin to suffer the symptoms of radiation sickness. The Blackfoot army still has yet to conquer another city, and with irradiated lands surrounding Mexico, it's certainly rational enough that they would hesitate against attacking whatever's left of Benito Juarez's fighting men. In the plains of Central Asia, once again we are met with a Vietnamese XCOM squadron under heavy fire. In spite of their superior numbers of the Vietnamese army, they cannot win if Cabal and Lashkar do not fall. Siberia stands their ground even in the face of Vietnamese superiority, and with not a single Vietnamese melee unit to be seen among the troops besieging Kabul and Lashkar, they will stand for 100 more nights. Elsewhere, the Buccaneer crisis only increases in size and stake as the first Inuit soldiers drop behind their lines at Petit Goave into the Yucatan Peninsula. Panic and riots occur in both Palenque and Maracaibo, for those inhuman soldiers are the furthest the Inuit have reached down south, bringing the cold with them. And further north you can just see another XCOM squad at the gates of Petit Goave. Gundams and paratroopers have invaded Freeport and have put it into Brazilian hands, and Piranha drops into the yellow. The Black Fleet shield of carriers is all but destroyed, and with 0 melee units in the area, Henry Morgan's days are numbered. Soon South America will be painted green, and Pedro will triumph once and for all. A Buccaneer worker force flees the capture of Freeport and siege of Piranha. They listen in mute horror as the first Inuit troops are spotted in the Yucatan and realize that they, alongside everyone else in the home islands, are counting the last of their days. Winter is here. And winter is over. Welcome to spring. It's so nice now. Well, a flash of hope arises for Henry Morgan as the Inuit and Brazil make peace with very little gains on the side of the Inuit. Brazil, however, has consumed most of South America. What will happen next is... I'm not sure. Australia still is at war with the Buccaneers, and they might make more of a push into the Caribbean now that they hold the Nassau Canal. But will they be able to manage that, considering how well the AI fights wars? And in this shot you can see that Henry Morgan managed to negotiate peace with Pedro without losing any more cities in the deal, I think. This, in comparison to the Inuit peace treaty, is far, far more crucial of a decision to reach and agree upon, but pay no mistake, for this is only a temporary respite. The West Coast remains under the banners of Henry Parks. Brazil reigns supreme over South America, and it'll be only a matter of time before green versus green happens. A battle of the hulks. They say that the night is darkest just before dawn. What with the Australian Wabagung Armada being active and a major threat, will dawn ever arrive for the Buccaneers? Will they stand the test of time as they have for 1,000 years? I suppose you'll find out next time as we move on to the Info Addicts. In this Info Addict, we can see that even after the devastating wars against the Buccaneers, they still are within the top 15 nations in population. However, looks can be deceiving as shown by the vast gap between the Boers, the Inuit, and Australia. And there, the Buccaneers barely edge out the Kimberley, itself a vestigial empire from its golden days. Yakusha sits dead last with only 90,000 citizens remaining. RIP. And next we see a relative arms race in terms of technology between the Inuit, Boer, Korean, and Australian scientists, with over 100 technologies discovered each. I do apologize for my Korean bias, but from their surprising competitiveness, their science-focused UA has always been their greatest edge, even against overwhelmingly large opponents like Yakusha and Vietnam in the past. As shown in the city slides, Korea has the fewest number of cities compared to the previously mentioned superpowers, but their science is undeniably the most efficient. Meanwhile, Boer and Australian gains continue to put them on track against the Inuits' infamous snow cities in the north. In terms of manpower, Australia's massive armada continues to boost them in the rankings, matched only by the Vietnamese drone fleet and the Boer hover tank roaming around their African holdings. Korea, worryingly, has the smallest of any top 10 nations, but with their new holdings in Yakutia, it's something they could amend in preparation for the oncoming storm. And here we are, the Legion of Lost Souls. Ashanti is dead last in number of exiles, with Persia leading somewhat. It has been a terrific experience and an utterly fantastic part to narrate, and now my watch is ended. 'Tis time for me to let another take my place, and I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. User Sledge115 signing off. I can finally fucking exhale. And this has been me, Dawkinzz, apologizing for having this drawn out and a little bit off the rails, but hopefully you enjoy this and join us next time with Burger Krieg for part 79. We'll see you next time.